All right, thank you. So just some Chairman's announcements. First, a warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Corporate Services and Infrastructure Select Committee, which is a Scrutiny Committee. And I'm the chairman of this meeting, Councillor John Riley. A key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit. We have a great many topic heads within our remit, and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. Details of the business to be covered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. Please note that members of the committee may be using their tablets or laptops or even their phones to view the agenda and papers from today's meeting. We're not expecting any fire drills, so if the fire alarm does go off, please follow officers to the fire exits and out the building to the designated meeting points. For those in the room, please switch any mobile devices to silent before the meeting starts. For those watching on YouTube, if you are so minded, you can complete one of our resident feedback forms. These can be found in the information section underneath the YouTube video. These forms are intended to help us improve the way that we run our meetings. Now we move on to the attendees at this meeting around this table, and I'll ask everybody to introduce themselves. I'll start with Councillor Bennett.
Councillor Adam Bennett.
Councillor Kaushik Banerjee.
Councillor Farhad Chubdar.
Matthew Woolbridge, the Council's Chief Operating Officer.
Dan Kennedy, Corporate Director of Resident Services.
Chris Malin, Head of Finance for Corporate Services and Finance.
Andy Goodwin, Head of Strategic Finance.
Steve Muldoon, Section 151 Officer.
Michael Norton, Head of Capital Programme.
Ian Anderson, Business Manager for Complaints and Inquiries.
Councillor Situl Punja.
Councillor Narinda Garg.
Anisha Tedji, Democratic Services.
All right, thank you very much. So, moving on to declaration. Oh, apologies for absence.
Apologies from Councillor Mand with Councillor Punja substituted, and apologies from Councillor Islam.
All right, thank you, and welcome, Councillor Punja, to the committee. All right, declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting, all the usual ones, I suppose. Anything extraordinary or different? No, good. So, minutes of the previous meeting, which start at page, agenda item 3, starting at page 1. So, on the last occasion, we dealt with all sorts of things, the delivery of the Hillingdon cycling strategy, and there were various things that we resolved to do or to note. We took quite a lot of time talking about the cycling strategy, which was very interesting. And then we went on to discuss our main topic, which we've had as a bit of a rolling topic this year, and we've talked about in the past, the maximisation of council spaces, asset use or good asset use, and the need for an asset register. So we had some more discussion there as far as that was concerned, but we'll take that forward further at other meetings. It's still something I know that members are very keen to explore and get on with. So unless anybody has any issues with the minutes, we can agree those. Thank you very much. All right. So after that we come, hang on to, so we're done with the minutes. And then confirm the items of business marked in part 1 will be considered in public, and any part 2s will be considered in private, but as ever, although I think we had one once, we don't have any part 2s. Alright, so item 5, which is the first of our topics. On page 5, agenda item 5, this is the complaints and inquiries report, and Ian, who usually presents this, will present it today. Thank you, Ian.
I hope everyone's had to look at the report because it contains a lot of information there. I'll just provide you sort of some highlights and then invite any questions that people might have. I think this 2024-25 year has been one where the two complaint handling codes by the local government ombudsman and the housing ombudsman have had a big impact in terms of the way we deal with complaints. The effect is they've removed what we used to call informal complaints and introduced service improvements. The effect of that is that there's fewer service improvements and greater number of formal complaints. It's just the way the definition went. So, for example, the total number of service requests that we dealt with last year was 3,208, which was a drop from the previous year, which was 3,729. The stage 1 complaints went up significantly from 681 in 2023-24 to 1,416. Stage 2 complaints did exactly the same thing, went from 180 to 337. The Ombudsman complaints stayed relatively similar from year to year, so from 65 to 77, which is sort of similar in terms of figures. In terms of the compliments, there was a reduction from 216 in the year before to 110, so that was disappointing, but some of that is people not providing the information so you could record it and note it down. So we need to have a drive on that this year to make sure that we pick up on that. I just wanted to mention a few things. I've given you the figures of service requests all the way up to the Ombudsman complaints. The system in itself is doing what it's designed to do, so you start with service requests, which is a big number, and then when you end up with the Ombudsman, you end up with a very small number. So as the complaints go through the stages, they get fewer and fewer because the aim of the Council is to try and resolve the complaints as quickly as possible, and the process is designed to do that. So as it goes all the way through the system, you get fewer complaints. 77 complaints went to the Ombudsman that were considered, and of those, 18 were upheld, 2 partially upheld, and 4 not upheld, with 53 which the Ombudsman described as did not investigate. It's complaints where the Ombudsman look at, but they think there's no merit to the complaint, so therefore they don't bother looking at any further. But it does skew our figures, because what happens is the Ombudsman then base their figures on the ones that they assessed as upheld, not upheld, partially upheld, whereas this greater number, which just is put to one side, which is a shame, because our figures would look better if it were taken into consideration, but they apply that through all the councils, so it's not just us. So it's a consistent approach they take across the country. In terms of members' inquiries, you will recall that we introduced service requests as a means of recording information that councillors provided. The effect of that is that from 2023 to 2024, the number of members' inquiries has gone down from 6,236 to 3,329. The volume of service requests has gone up from 5,500 odd to 7,100. When you add the total number of members' inquiries and service requests together, you end up with roughly the same figure. So it tends to sort of balance itself out. The aim is that the service requests are for those one-off actions where you just want us to do something that we can just deal with quickly. So that's been a useful tool that's been introduced. In terms of the number of members' inquiries and the volume in terms of how it's split, housing services has the highest numbers of members' inquiries, which is 733. Antisocial behaviour is 410, and waste 401. So those are the 3 highest members' inquiries that are submitted by members. When it comes to service requests that are submitted by members, fly tipping is enormous. It's 2,589, closely followed by what used to be called as street cleansing, which is another 1,800. So those 2 areas account for something like 4,500 of the total 7,100 service requests that come in, so it's heavily weighted in those two areas. I think that's probably all I want to say in terms of the figures, and then I'm very happy to take any questions, or if you want me to elaborate any further, I'm happy to do that.
All right, thank you. I think the interesting point you make about the way in which the Ombudsman deals with things, and I know you say it's a national application, of course it is, but if there is more than half of the referrals to the Ombudsman that aren't taken up, but they've got that far, then as you say, it tends to look a bit skewed, because it looks like we've had more complaints or more concerns than we really have, because they've got to a certain point and then been batted back, as it were. Is that what's happening?
Yeah. 2/3 of complaints that the Ombudsman look at fall into this did not investigate category. They tend to be ones where people are unhappy with our application of policy. So they go to the Ombudsman, and the Ombudsman, the reality is there's very little that they can do. So, for example, our application of the social housing allocation policy for housing services, you get lots of complaints to the Ombudsman about parking, but then there's parking services, so for example, and there's a statutory procedure that people have to follow in order to challenge that decision. So there's lots of those that fall into the did not investigate category, because people are unhappy with what we've done, but the reality is that there are other means by which they can actually get satisfaction.
And so, when the Ombudsman issues their report, do they make that point that the ones that aren't investigated have got to them, but nevertheless they haven't needed to make a determination, because in a sense, they've already made a determination that it doesn't have any merit as far as their tests are concerned?
Yes, very much so. The reports that they provide in many cases go over 10 pages, so you know they've actually looked at it properly, but there's no real benefit that they can sort of have, or any impact they can have on that, because there's a different mechanism by which the complainant can find recourse. So yeah, they provide a very detailed report setting out what they've looked at, the facts of the case, and the reason why they've arrived at the decision that they have.
All right, Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ian, for such a comprehensive report. I really like the detail and sort of the breakdown of information in this report. I just want to build on the question that the Chairman asked around the Ombudsman investigations. When, how do I put this, the investigation is found against us, do we put our hands up and almost take some learnings? So if they do find against us, we actually think, okay, fair enough, we got it wrong. We then sort of build in that learning into our processes and almost like take that as a feedback loop, or do we just like take it on advice and we don't really address it? If you could just expand on that, that would be great. Thank you.
You will see in the report that when you look at the housing services, there's an awful lot of upheld complaints in there. It's a tricky question to answer, only because a lot of those complaints that were upheld go back to 2022-23. It takes the housing ombudsman and local government it takes them 9 months to get through a complaint. So by the time it's actually gone through the complaint process, it's in some cases, a couple of years have gone past. So we may well have changed our processes already, and in many cases we already taken action to address it. But in answer directly to your question is, when we get a decision, whatever that decision is, if it's upheld and there are significant findings of fault, we take it seriously. The corporate director, the head of service, the various officers involved, all are required to look at the actual findings, and where there are changes needed, they are made. What will be contained in the Ombudsman report is they'll make recommendations, or they'll say there's an order. Each one of those we will apply, but equally we will make sure that the application is across whatever that area is, so we apply the change to make sure it doesn't happen again. So that's important, otherwise there's no real point in doing it, I suppose. All right, Councillor Bennett. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. two questions, if I may. The first one was just, is there any consistency across local authorities as to how they measure complaints, service requests, inquiries per head of population? Just so that, obviously, we kind of get the trend over time and the difference VRY, but how do we perform versus other London boroughs, other boroughs across the country? Is there any consistency in that, in the methodology, or not?
We all apply the same definition of a complaint and the service request now, so that's consistent in terms of that. But I guess the application of it will vary from council to council. If you would like, I'm very happy to give you information about how our neighbouring local authorities do in comparison to the various services that we have complaints over. So I can certainly provide that for you. But it's interpretation, I suppose, that, when someone's looking at it, they're saying, well, actually, is that upheld or is that not upheld? So it's that individual that's looking at it that's making that judgment. An individual's viewpoint can differ, I suppose, in that respect. But the definition of what is a complaint and what we perceive to be a justified complaint or a not justified complaint across the council is pretty consistent. But if you're asking me, will Croydon or Ealing or Harrow view it in the same way, that's harder for me to answer because I just wouldn't know. But I can give you the figures if that's helpful.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I guess as well it's the same even within Hillingdon, where you've got different councillors will put in different levels of service requests and MEs because people think of things slightly differently. My second question was just around, so with the fly tipping and the street cleansing, is how does the information, and as Councillor Banerjee said, a really comprehensive report, how does this feed back into the Cabinet and other directorates to kind of say, well, actually, look, over time, hypothetically, we can see that fly tipping and street cleansing is increased, and based on the locations that we identify in GOS, we know where the hotspots are. Is there kind of that continuous improvement loop within, say, waste services and street cleansing to address those areas with greater resource, such that actually next year you would expect the number of service requests to come down because we're learning from the data that we're gathering?
Yeah. In terms of the sort of what waste services are doing, or generally across the council, what are we doing when we identify issues? But in terms of waste, you mentioned the key thing. Really, we've identified the hotspots, the areas where there are significant volumes of fly tipping or street cleansing is needed. What the team have done is they've identified them sort of main roads where that occurs, and there's a focus there to try and make sure that doesn't happen again. There is a link between the waste team and the antisocial behaviour team, so they work together to try and identify, if they find a fly tip, there may be some information in there who's fly tipped it. So you've got the antisocial behaviour team working with the waste services to try and make sure that we try and catch, if we can, the person who's actually perpetrated, or persons. But within the system, we've got information that's held within the sort of the various systems that's held in waste service and across the council, which gives us that information, which we can try and work with. And I think that's some of the key focus in the going ahead.
Yeah, that would be good. And to be honest, it's maybe a question for the Cabinet member, but I'm sure other councillors would be the same. That I can do the same walk in my ward every single Saturday, and I know roughly on what roads and in what places there's going to be fly tipping. And that's what I'm here for, is to put it through as a service request. But it does get to the point where sometimes you're doing it every week, where you think, well, if I'm doing this every week, why isn't one of our waste services colleagues doing it? Because the data capture is there. It's just how we then use that to drive our resource. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just picking up on that, the extent to which we are able to use, and we've been talking to Matthew about this for quite some time, use data better and or properly in terms of meeting whatever it is that the data is telling us. And the fly tipping thing was a very good point, but I note what you said previously about the MEs and service requests. First of all, I think there probably was a time when members were putting MEs in which covered both aspects, service requests and MEs, because sometimes a service request has a sort of ME element about it because you're asking a question about it, but you're also saying, can this be done? And then what looks like has happened is that the trend seems to have been that service requests have gone up, MEs have gone down, but probably it sounds as if it's because the subject matter of what otherwise would have been an ME has become a service request, and so members have kind of learnt, if you like, from that certain subjects which they would otherwise have put in as an ME actually should be a service request. Is that what's happened, do you think?
Chair, let me pick up on the data point. So we've invested heavily into data analytics as an organisation over the last couple of years, and for example, when we're looking at some of the issues that come out in complaints, they are part of our key performance indicators, which will be presented to the Cabinet tomorrow. So we understand how they relate to the performance of the organisation, and that looks at the trends over time. Also, we have deep analytics. So I've got it right in front of me, actually. So what I'm looking at is every complaint across the council. So they are geolocated, so we understand where the complaint is. We understand what subject it is. We can break it down by ward, member inquiries, by the councillor that submitted them, so we can really see the trends. Also, we are investing at the moment in a better mechanism for things like fly tips. So we're looking at a better mechanism that residents can report, so we get that more live information, so it'll be geocoded. So that means when you are complaining about a fly tip, you can do it live on your phone, and it'll be geocoded. That will mean the service gets better information more quickly, so they can respond more quickly, because often the issue, and it's very typical across local government, is there's a bit of a lag, because it's a common problem across London boroughs with fly tipping. So you're always going to get a high level of complaints, service requests in that area. So we will look at trends, we will look at areas, we will look at locations, and that's how we mobilise the workforce to respond to those, recognising, given the volume and given our budget, you can't always respond to them as quickly as some residents might like. And there will be things like seasonal trends, there will be trends, for example, around collection times, for refuse collection times. So we've got really good data attached to it, so it enables us, more importantly, to use our resources in each area in the most efficient way as possible. So we're spending it on residents, and we've got the analytics to make sure that we can spend our money not on processing the data manually, not on trying to understand what it is. We can spend it on people actually doing the job to support our residents in picking up some of the areas that they are most concerned about. So we're getting better and better, but it is a London-wide, it is a national problem, and it does go back into our stats of numbers are going up, and we don't always have the resources to do things as quickly as people might like. But we've got great analytics to help us use it the best way we can.
But that's interesting, because I mean we've been talking about this idea of being able to report things as you see them, walking along on your phone and so forth, for quite some time, haven't we? And in some, yes, the speed thing is a good idea, but at the same time, it seems to me that if you're able to identify a trend more quickly, so Councillor Bennett walking past the same spot and sees the same thing, there should come an optimum time when the frequency of his reference to a certain geographical place is pinging away with the officers, so they know that at least on certain occasions or frequently enough there's going to be fly tipping there, because for whatever reason, whether the fact that the council end up dealing with fly tipping sort of not encourages, but allows fly tippers to think, well, frankly, we might as well carry on because it'll get picked up anyway. And of course we can't just leave it there, that would be ridiculous, but at the same time, if we do keep taking it away, then we're kind of doing their job for them, sort of thing. But at least, I suppose my point is that we're getting to a stage, are we, where those trends are immediately going to the service area that deals with them, and they can say, well, all right, we may not be able to deal with it now, but at least we know where it is, and we can have a blitz at some stage or in a week or something, especially if it's a regular place, so that, because the chances are it will come back. Is that the thing that's happening?
Yeah, so we're moving more to, I mean, what Councillor Bennett's describing is almost you're using the data which will be predictive analytics. Well, humans can do that because they can also see, you know, walking down the same road every Saturday you'll see fly tips in the same place. So what we're trying to move to as an organisation, and not just in fly tipping, across a number of services, is being more proactive, more predictive in picking up issues before they come issues rather than being reactive. But again, it's about using the resources we have in the best way possible to respond. And what Ian's saying is quite right. Boroughs are going to be very different. So, for example, I live in I would say in a less nice London borough that isn't as clean. So you're going to get a lot less reports of fly tips. Here we get a lot more reports of fly tips because of the perceived human instinct that you see something you want to report it. So we have quite a high reporting culture in Hillingdon, which is a good thing. But you're not always going to get the same approach across all the London boroughs. And although fly tips are going up and environmental services issues are going up, it's a perception of residents, sometimes more compared to a reality. But our job is to use the resources we've got the best way possible to respond, recognising that we can't always respond as quickly as every resident might like.
And I suppose the other thing is that in terms of fly tipping, and I know we're concentrating a bit on it, but it is a big deal for residents, the ability to investigate fly tippers based on the fly tipping. And I remember going out recently for something else where we came across a load of stuff and people very helpfully had left envelopes or something, or labels or something that kind of gave an indication. I mean, it may not have been those people, but nevertheless that was a route. So if you see a trend in terms of a geographical spot, are you able to better investigate, do you think?
I can't really answer that because I don't run the service, but we'd be happy to come back and write you a written response in how the service works in that respect.
But in terms of the fact that we're getting more data, it's really the connection between data, as you said before, between data collection and practical application. Similarly, with things like weed control or pavement and so forth. Again, there's a perception issue. I understand that because, you know, when it's being done a lot, if it goes down a little bit, that means something bigger to people than if it's never been done. So yeah, that's interesting. The other thing I wanted to pick up on with both you and Ian was this business about the frequency of similar or same service requests. I mean, again, does that help with trends and with ability to look at geographical areas or particular issues?
Yeah, again, we have automated dashboards that every time a service request comes in, we can see the location, we can see the subject matter, we can look at, you know, the month-by-month trends. So again, by better understanding our data, I mean, this is a similar approach that we're trying to take across the whole council, whether it's fly tipping, antisocial behaviour, complaints, service requests, is having the live data, understanding the trends, the month. So some are seasonal, some are location. You know, you get different trends across different types of services. You know, more fundamentally, it helps the managers better manage their services by having more powerful information.
All right, and just one more on this. If you see that a particular councillor is asking a number of service request questions, as it were, are you in a position to then sort of go back to them and talk about the issue and see what, if there is again a kind of trend in terms of what's happening and kind of help them with an outcome?
Yes, we actually do. We go back to the councillor and try and point out what we are doing in terms of that particular area. Sometimes if it's the waste aspect of it, we do invite councillors to inspections that take place. So, you know, whether ASBIT and the waste people turn up, they're involved in the actual sort of searching and undertaking the actual work to clear that area so that they actually see what's being done. So that's we try and do as much as we can to work with a number of. There are one or two councillors that submit large volumes in terms of the fly tipping area. So we do try and go back to them, just say, you know, we're aware it's a hot spot. We'll get there. It's something that Matthew said earlier, and we can't get there quick enough. So we may visit on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but we can't get there quick enough. So we may visit on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but we can't get there quick enough. So we may visit on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but we can't get there quick enough. So we may visit on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but we can't get there quick enough. So we may visit on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but we can't get there quick enough. So we may visit on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but we can't get there quick enough. So we may visit on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but we can't get there quick enough. So we may visit on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but we can't get there quick enough. So we may visit on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but we can't get there quick enough. So we may visit on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but we can't get there quick enough. So we may visit on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but we can't get there quick enough. So but the councillor may visit on Tuesday and they've identified it. So we'll clear it up on Wednesday, but it's there before it's turned up before we got there.
Thank you, Councillor Chipler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You say you mentioned that you've got the data and you know where the hotspots are. So, as a ward councillor, if I came to you, would you be able to provide me with that information? That where are the hotspots in my ward? Because, okay, I'll leave you to answer that.
Yes, we can. Yeah. So we've got the data broken down across a number of services by ward, by month. We have to be sometimes careful for GDPR issues what information we do give, but we can give depersonalised information. Yes.
We are the ward councillors, so we are data controllers for our residents in our wards, etc., etc. So you should be able to share that information with us.
Yeah, depersonalised information, absolutely.
My other question is, you mentioned that you do come back to ward councillors when there are repeated events. And I've been a councillor for 7 years. I've reported so many things which are repeated, and I've never had a call from an officer, yourself, or your department discussing the issues which are repetitive with me.
We're very happy to do that, councillor, if you'd like to do that. But we tend to go to the councillors who have significant volumes of those that submitted. Some will submit 200 in a month, so that's that there are significant volumes. So it's those that we would go back to. But we're very happy to provide you with the information, or come back to you and talk to you about your area if that's what you would like.
All right, thank you. I suppose before I come to Councillor Garg, I suppose one thing that all councillors can do is to put in an ME asking for a service request breakdown, which is a bit counterintuitive, but or to say, if a particular issue is one that is frequently raised, perhaps you can help us with various aspects of it. All right, Councillor Garg.
Yeah. So just a quick question on page 9, table 2. As well as complaints, we've got a part of the table which shows all the compliments. It's just quite worrying, really, that even the compliments have gone from 502 in 21 to 110 this year. I mean, in terms of data analytics, as well as looking at the complaints and things, what are we doing to look at why the compliments have gone down and why people aren't complimenting staff as much?
Compliments is when we receive it's very welcome. I think the thing that we have to be careful with compliments, though, is it tends to go in trends. So the figure that you're talking about, 500, was one where we introduced some flowers, or I can't remember what they were. There were flowers in across the borough, and we ended up with hundreds of compliments of people saying how lovely those flowers looked. So of course massively increased the compliments for that area. But over the last few years, that hasn't been in place, and therefore the volumes go down. But I acknowledge what you say, Councillor, and I think part of that is my fault, really, in that in order to capture that information, I need to make sure that people within the service know actually who to send it to. And I think over the years I haven't done that. I haven't done enough to tell people that within the council, say, actually, if you get a compliment, send it to me, so we can then start to record that. So I guess the part of that fault lies with me. But in terms of the actual reason for the decrease from 500 to 110, I would say to you, I think it was wildflowers, actually. It was to do something like that. That had a massive impact.
I think it was when we when we didn't mow certain areas and let the wildflowers grow, maybe?
It was something to do with flowers. I can't remember what flowers, but it had a massive. We had about 200-300 compliments on those because it just looked pretty.
All right, thank you, Councillor Punter.
Thank you, Chair. I would actually like to share a good news story, because in terms of the going back to councillors and going and doing these kind of ward events, I have done a couple in Useley with officers, which have been actually really, really good, not just in highlighting hotspots, but actually working with businesses to actually get them to drive down where they put their rubbish and waste out as well. And I thought that was a really good thing. So I am going to say that is a good news story for the council in how that has happened. I haven't done one recently, but I would welcome doing another one like that. But it's also where we targeted households as well and spoke to places where we knew where there was there were massive hotspots on particular streets. I don't know if that exists anymore, but I know that it did probably 18 months ago when I did a really big one in our ward, and it was really effective. And I'd like to pick up on what Councillor Bennett was saying, because what he was talking about in improvements, data analytics and improving the services, which is so vitally important. And on the other spectrum of that, there would be the data analytics that basically would look at the correlation to cuts to services as well, and the impact of that on service requests and members' inquiries. So in this space where we know that waste and fly tipping and housing and whatever those issues are and antisocial behaviour is an increase, we know that actually with antisocial behaviour and waste services, resident services have had the biggest cuts in the last few years. So that correlation analysis would be very interesting to kind of see, so that it could then go into what Councillor Bennett was saying, improvement of services, because policy direction might need to be a bit different in being able to improve services with the resources that we have.
All right, thank you, Councillor Mudger. The purpose of this committee is to scrutinise and ask questions. What was the question, please?
Well, I would like to share a good news story, so I thought that would be welcomed by the council. And my story was do we do the analysis of correlations to cuts to services as well?
All right, thank you. I don't know if anybody's in any position to comment on that or answer anything that came out of that.
I'm not in a position to answer that question, but what I would say in terms of that sort of question is that our focus is on delivering the best services that we can for the council. All staff are focused towards doing that. And from a complaint perspective, what I often see is that, or I sometimes see, is that, say for example, waste services, sometimes we don't always do, so for example, you get loads of stage 1 complaints where someone goes and complains that their waste hasn't been collected. For whatever reason, as a result of an oversight, an officer forgets then the following week or the week after to go and collect that. So you end up with another complaint. But that could well have been avoided, and that's nothing to do with staff resources, that's just officers not doing what they ought to do, and I do see that certainly in terms of when it comes to the actual the waste side of things. But beyond that, I don't think I could answer any further.
All right, thank you. Right, well, Councillor Banerjee, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to double click on the compliments information that you provided in the appendix. I also agree that this is. We should shine light on this. It's not just about complaints and things going wrong. Things have gone well, and you've provided a lot of detail in the compliments. My question is there any relationship between the compliments and the individuals who receive the compliments in their annual review? Because if not, I think it should be. It may not be huge rating in terms of their performance review, but the fact that a resident or somebody's taken time to write in, and some of these compliments are really, really good. They sort of really call out the individual, list what they did, and around the housing sort of compliments. I think it's a really good news story, and it should impact somebody's year-end review. If you could just let me know, that would be great. Thank you.
Compliments are valued and very much valued. The one thing I would just add with that is that when someone complains, they've got an interest. There's an interest for them to get something. But when someone sends you a compliment, actually they've got nothing to gain from that. So when we receive that, it's very welcome. What happens is that the officer is made aware of it. It goes on their personal file. The manager then obviously speaks to them. It's then circulated across the sort of an email chain, so that person, whoever is involved, is made to feel valued in terms of what they've done for that particular side of things. But also sometimes, I suppose I'm a bit mean when it comes to compliments, in that what I regard as a compliment is someone who's gone over and above what their job is. So if my job is to answer the phone, and if someone compliments me for that, I don't really think that's a compliment, because I'm just doing the job. So it's been quite strict in terms of what that is, in terms of what it means for complements. The other thing I just wanted to sort of chip in, I've talked a lot about sort of the volume of complaints and also complements, but if you think about the number of houses that we provide a service to across the borough, there's over 10,000 odd that we provide. If you think about the number of residents that we provide service to across our council, 250,000 plus, and you look at the number of complaints that you've got there, which really is a drop in the ocean. They're valued, they're important, and we will do that to sort of address all those different aspects of it, but it's just put it into perspective in terms of that. That would be my point.
All right, thank you. And Councillor Bennett.
I don't believe I signalled. I can come up with a question. I would like me to, but no, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. As ever, Ian, these are very interesting reports and always bring up topics of interest as far as we're concerned. And some new things have come out this time, which is great. But unless anybody else has any other questions on this one, we can thank Ian very, very much and go on to item 6. Thank you. No, wait, right. So, on page 5 of agenda item 5, we've got the recommendations. Firstly, that the committee note the contents of the report and provide any comments to the officers as appropriate. Well, we've done that for the last nearly hour. And a copy of this report be shared with other select scrutiny committee members, because we are the overarching committee on a lot of this material. So, are those recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, so I can put a tick through that. Excellent. Ian, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. So, agenda item 6, which also has 2 recommendations, which we'll come to at the end, but to note the 24-25 out-term position, and also to note the 25-26 month 2 budget monitoring position. And for the first time, we have Steve Muldoon with us, Corporate Director of Finance. So welcome, and thank you for coming. Not for the first time, we've got Matthew Warbridge and, of course, Dan Kennedy, 2 officers that we know very, very well, and other officers to help on this particular agenda item. So maybe we can start with this, that looking at the position overall, it's clear, obviously, that we're still to a large extent, a low-cost council providing good services. We've had reports in the recent past and inspections that have highlighted the quality of services, children's services, and also adult social care. So, sort of set against that background and what you've seen so far, both Steve and Matthew, and obviously Dan can chip in as well on that kind of general overall picture. And we're dealing, of course, with the total outturn for 24-25, and then, which is last year to that extent, it's always like this, and then 25-26, and we're looking at month 2. Perhaps you'd like to sort of start the ball rolling by commenting against that background.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you everyone for welcoming me. Looking forward to my time here at the Council, and hope to be able to help everybody understand the financial situation of the Council and demystify anything along the way. Yes, I've spent the last 2 weeks trying to understand and get to grips with the financial position of the Council and the backdrop to where we find ourselves today. You will all have seen the outturn for the last financial year and the P2 position for the full Council. What this report here today presents is the section relating to the portfolios that fit under the Select Committee. I think as part of that overall backdrop, obviously there is a lot of commentary around the fair funding, and yet we don't know the full extent of what we will get. We have some projections that we've received from London Council's modelling, which indicates that Hillingdon is underfunded compared to where it should be and where it's been over recent years. That funding will be phased in over 3 years, we understand, so we will not get the full amount that the council would be due if it were to fully catch up to where they say it ought to be. I think actually if you then take that projected additional income funding that the council would receive and then compare that with where the council is currently forecasting its position for this year and where it outturned for the year just gone, that extra funding would have covered those deficits and those overspends. So that does put some context around the position that the council currently finds it in. That said, we are where we are and we need to take the action we need to do to put the council in the best position it possibly can given the circumstances and the cards that it's been dealt. So that will be certainly something that I'll be focusing on over the coming weeks and months. Would you like me to then take you through the highlights of the report?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so the report covers the outturn for 24-25. There's a series of tables at the back. So tables 1 to 5 cover the outturn position, both revenue and capital and savings. So the outturn for this portfolio in the year just gone was an underspend within the finance and transformation portfolio of 1.3 and an underspend of 0.9 million in the corporate services and property. That's obviously a subset of the overall council outturn that I just referred to. The report then dives into some of the details behind that, and we can cover that in due course. In terms of the savings for the year just gone, there was a target of 4.7 million of savings. By the end of the year, 1.7 million of the savings had been banked and delivered, and we had to carry forward 3 million from last year into the current financial year from this portfolio. So when you look at the savings target for this year, it has been elevated by that 3 million, and then we can talk.
And when you say this year, obviously a lot of the report is about 24-25.
The current financial year that we find ourselves in.
That we're in now,
yes,
that's 25-26.
So 25-26 has been uplifted by that.
But obviously there were savings targets for 24-25.
Yep.
Which was the...
So the target for last year ended was 4.7.
Yes.
1.7 delivered, 3 million shortfall carried forward. In terms of capital, we had a total budget of nearly 120 million. There was an underspend on that of nearly 33 million. That breaks down into a 5.4 million true underspend on those projects that were completed, and the balance 27.4 million of that underspend we have carried forward into 25-26 to ensure that those projects continue and have the funding available to them.
Just, are there any particular projects that take up quite a lot of that amount?
Yes, I mean obviously this is all covered in table 4. There's quite a lot of detail in that table 4. We can take you through the detail of that as part of questions if you'd like, but certainly I think there was a SEND provision programme, the contract going into administration, and that has caused a delay to that programme, slipping that into 25-26. Hillingdon Water Sports Facility, I think there's about 5 million variance on that one as well. So those are the kind of the two major ones appearing in the list there. Okay, so HRA capital outturn, total budget there of 193, an underspend of just under 15 million, which strikes me as a very low underspend compared with a lot of capital programmes that I've seen elsewhere in terms of underspend, so that's a positive story there in terms of how well that's been managed.
What do you mean by that?
I typically see a higher rate of underspend on capital programmes because things come to pass which cause delays and decisions cannot be made at the pace and delivery cannot take place at the time that the council would like those to take place. So less than 10% slippage is, to be honest, quite a good position if you compared across the large majority of councils.
And do those tend to be events that couldn't have been foreseen? They're events to be reacted to, as it were?
Yes, I would argue that is largely the case. Sometimes it comes down to contracts and sometimes some governance around decisions. Sometimes there's planning decisions and things take longer to come to fruition. So it's not always plain sailing going through the project life cycle.
All right, thank you. Yeah, sure. Okay. Carry on.
So Table 5 covers the HRA programme, capital programme. Then moving on to the forecast month 2 position, which is the remainder of the slides 6 through to 8. Slight difference to what was shown for last year. So we are projecting an overspend of just over 4 million at the end of P2. So that is for the full year, not the position at the end of May, just to be clear. So that's the projection of the full 12 months at that point. That breaks down into largely Treasury. So within Finance and Transformation, a variance of 3.4 million. The large part of that is the Treasury interest, high level of costs, low level of income on Treasury income that's allocated to
and again, what does, just if people don't know, what does Treasury mean?
So Treasury is how we manage our loans and our spare cash. So whether we invest spare cash, we've got balances in general bank accounts, or we're having to borrow money from the likes of PWLB. Right. Okay. So I think coming into the year we had lower cash balances than anticipated because of the council's overall position in the outturn of last year, and also the DSG deficit that has grown over time is a drain on the council's own cash position, and that all leads into a higher level of borrowing that the council has to bear, which brings interest charges. There's also an overspend of 0.6 in the corporate services and property area, so shortfalls against lease income and some shortfalls on expected savings. So Table 6 and 7 cover those areas.
Sorry, just on that one for a second.
Yeah.
What causes that reduction?
On the lease income?
Yeah.
Andy.
Yeah, sure. So it's a lot of this linked to the civic centre transformation work, where we're updating the building and carrying out work, trying to free up space in the building and lease it out. So that's an ongoing capital programme that anyone in the building will see as they walk around. So that's been slightly delayed, we haven't been able to offer the leases yet. So we're still in conversation around moving that programme forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. So savings for this portfolio for 25-26, as I mentioned earlier, there's an additional 3 million coming into the year on top of what was originally put through in the budget back in February, which was 5.7, so there's a total 8.3 that is being targeted for savings for this year. And in respect to delivery against that, we have over 50% is currently banked or on track for delivery. We have some which are in the initial stages of delivery, so it's yet to be proven as to whether they will deliver in year and on track. So the jury's out on that one, as it were. We do have some savings which are beginning to see some issues. So we've got a further £974,000 worth of savings which are at risk, facing challenges in delivery and so on.
What are the sort of blockers or problems with achieving the savings that we're trying to?
The nature of the savings, when you look down the schedule Table 8 is the schedule of savings for the current financial year, 25-6. They are quite varied in nature, so you can't say that there is one common theme driving all of these, I would say.
But sorry, did I understand that we'd already achieved some savings?
Yes, so actually we have banked more than we achieved last year already by this point.
Oh, right. And how much is that?
So 1.7 million banked so far this year.
So far this year?
Compared with
so
1.5, 1.6 for last year.
Is that up to month 2?
That's up to month 2.
Okay.
Yeah. However, some of those savings that we brought forward, that 3 million that we brought forward, we have identified following further review that they will not all be achievable, and we are proposing that 1.2 million of those will need to be written off because they won't be deliverable.
Won't be achievable at all, or need more time?
Yeah, it won't be a case of just carrying those forward.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah. Okay, and then just in terms, finally, risks and mitigations, that's a fairly broad comment about the Council's overall risks and mitigations. I think for this portfolio, the key areas to focus on going forward through this year will be the Treasury position, in particular because that would get impacted by the overall Council financial position. So that's one to keep an eye on. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you also for going through this report in a lot of detail. It's quite interesting. I just wanted to pick up, because it's fresh in my mind, your point about Treasury. My understanding is that compared to other councils, our level of debt is actually quite reasonable, around 500 million, and our rate of interest is around 2.2%, which is again quite low. So in terms of borrowing and funding, we do have some movement in this area and some space. So in terms of Treasury, in that particular area, I'd like to make the statement we're actually in quite a good position. Is that your point of view as well?
There are a number of councils, I shan't name any, that we see around London and around the country who have much higher levels of debt, absolutely, and much higher levels of debt compared with their overall level of activity in the council. So they are much more highly geared. We are proportionally lower geared. I think the reason we see these variances coming through is because that's then a variance against what we budgeted and anticipated for the year. So that's what's driving the comments around variances. But I think you are right in that we have a prudent level compared with a lot of other councils, in terms of we have not over-borrowed, we've not been investing in unsuitable assets to try and drive up revenue returns, to try and chase savings through investment. So we are not, part of our financial position is not driven in the way that other councils have seen them to be. So, yeah.
All right, Councillor Punja.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to talk about capital receipts, actually, first of all. So I can see capital numbers in the 24-25, but I can't see anything against 25-26. And given that we're looking at month 2 and now we're already going to month 4 tomorrow to Cabinet, I just wanted to ask what happens if the receipt levels are not delivered against forecast?
Yeah, thank you. I think so far this year we've probably achieved about £600,000 of capital receipts, and we do have a substantial target. That is some of that is then planned for allocation against transformation expenditure, which is the activity required to deliver some of our cost-saving initiatives. We will, if that does not deliver, we will need to see what the level of capital receipts we have achieved in the year, plus what we have actually brought forward. So it's not totally about what we achieve in year, but we have got some banks that we've brought forward from past years that we can apply against that expenditure. So it's not necessarily a problem, but we will need to look hard at the expenditure that is planned for that and make an assessment of whether any of that expenditure could be deferred. If it doesn't actually contribute, for example, to a saving in year, we may need to do some prioritisation on that spend so that does not then contribute to a problem, because obviously we are using those receipts to pay for that transformation activity, which would otherwise become a revenue cost.
Thank you. And just on that transformation, because there is we're looking at £17 million worth of capital receipts for the transformation, for £17 million worth of transformation, I believe. So what I would like to do, so as you say, if it's not received, but we can't see that in the reports, we can't see that narrative, we can't see the reporting here. So is there a reason for that? Should we not be seeing that, given that this is supposed to be the committee that we're supposed to see those things in?
Certainly we can take that back and make sure that's addressed in the future report if that's not fully explained in this one. Certainly we can do that. I don't think we are dependent on 17 million to support our revenue for this year, though. It's not as high as that. It's a much lower figure.
Very often.
But yeah, we can cover that in a more detailed commentary in the next report.
But very often the reports we get, and we ask for this, sometimes we ask for more detail, but in the past we've asked for a sort of broader picture, and then we pick it up in the meeting in terms of any other issues. But I want to go back to savings, and it seems that we're doing sort of better on savings in the current year in those terms, but in terms of a sort of fairly detailed breakdown of savings by, and the trouble is we end up papers this deep, I suppose, but in terms of departments that contribute to our terms of reference, being able to see how those savings are approached or achieved, or at the very least are thought about. Is there a better way of reporting those, in order that, as a committee, we can see progress of saving and also see direction of travel?
I think at Table 8 there is quite a lot of detail that you have available to you should you want to dive into any of those particular savings. I think in then you can obviously ask officers in terms of how any one of those is progressing in the approach. I think there's also a question of, when it comes to the budget setting process and the scrutiny around that, when savings are being formulated and proposed, that there is a good challenge and conversation had at that time about the savings that are being put forward and how they will be approached before they get finally built into the budget.
All right, thank you. Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to build on the point that the Chair raised around savings. And reading sort of your breakdown on page 49.30, we're already month 2 and 51% of the savings and interventions are being recorded as banked or on track for delivery, and a further 23% I think to be realised later on this year. If I read that to signal that you're ahead of schedule, A, is that a correct statement? And if it is, are we sort of like looking at the projects and looking at almost like what's next on the hopper to say, actually, we're ahead of schedule, we should be more aggressive in terms of savings and bring something that was maybe planned later on, maybe next financial year or the year before, we can bring it forward now because we're doing a really good job with the savings? Is that like part of your planning, budgeting and forecasting process, or are we just going to stick with what we've got this year and then focus on next financial year? Thank you.
I think it's worth just a glance at Table 8 while I kind of talk this through. So what you'll see on Table 8 is the full list of the savings for this portfolio, and when you look down the list, most of the savings are either in one category or another. So you have blue, which we consider delivered. Now, the saving itself might be something that accrues over the whole course of the year, but we've taken all of the action required. So if it's, for example, a headcount reduction or a vacancy elimination to generate the saving from the budget that's done from the very start of the year, we would classify that as fully banked, but the full year figure is there and recorded here. So it's not 2/12 of the saving achieved at that point. So I hope that kind of makes sense, that we categorise them as one or the other. So it's not necessary that you keep that run rate going and look, we've done it all by month 6. That's not the case. So you need to look at individual lines.
Again, going back to Table 8 and savings, and one of our favourites, because it was something that we highlighted in April, I think it was, the garages, as an example of how to dig down into things. So we've got a heading, garage voids, and we were talking back then about the practical, and I'll come on to the one above it, which is council assets in a moment, but the kind of practical ways in which, and I know it's a small area, but it was quite helpful to focus on that as an example, because it seemed to us at the time to be a fairly easy example to look at, as it were. And just wondering, because we did raise it earlier, and it may be something that others in the team can deal with because you weren't here, as to how we've done on that very small area, because it was an area that we picked up on last time. Because it did seem to us that, again, and we'll come back to this with regard to assets, that we had a sort of ABC type of situation where A's were absolutely brilliant and were able to be used and used well and rented and all the rest of it. B's, well, they could be done up and then used properly, and C's absolutely awful, knock them down or sell it or something, or do something with it. Do you have a handle on how that's going, or does anybody else?
So I've just picked up this area, and but I am assured that there's been a lot of work to review the garages portfolio, but we'll need to bring back to committee the further details on that once we've kind of crunched the numbers and have reported back to CMT and cabinet members.
That's very kind. But taking on board that, is it sensible to take on board that kind of way of looking at it, which is what we were talking about back in April?
Yeah, I mean, a very sort of analytical and sort of best use of resources approach is certainly the approach we need to take with assets, and relate it to, importantly, how the service strategy needs to change, and the use of those assets therefore needs to change as well. So, and that obviously needs to keep in step with our residents' needs and how we best meet those needs. So whether we, for example, look at how we deliver services closer to the residents in the community, or we centralise them, and we just use assets in a very different way than we've perhaps historically used them in the past. That's going to be part of the approach looking forward.
Because on that point, and it leads me on to the whole issue of assets, I mean, I know ultimately it's not, and we all know ultimately it's not going to generate, tens of millions. But looking, and the assets we're talking about here, and we have been, and we wanted to do a review on this, are not housing. That's something completely different. But these would be things like, I don't know, amenity, basically things that the council owns, centres, amenity centres, rooms in. We had the library people here last time, and they were great. I mean, they were already doing in a small way what we would like to do across the piece. And one of the ways of being able to achieve that is to have an asset register, knowing all of the assets that we have. And we've been talking about this for some little while. Is that something that we can, I know Matthew's got his hands on this, but is that something that we can get on with so that we can then scrutinise the use of assets? And again, I'd quite like to apply an ABC approach to those as well.
Yeah, we're currently doing some work on making sure we've got a coherent asset register as a council, but also we put it into a system or systems, recognising that you can have a list of assets, for example. It's the level of detail that you need against each asset. So, for example, one asset might have a lease, one might have a different type of contract. So by pulling together all of our asset information and having it in a system enables us to make better decisions based on the data, whereas at the moment, we've got some paper forms, we've got some stuff sitting on different systems. We're looking at consolidating those, and we've put the investment behind it, so we're working on that at the moment.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. So my question is for Steve, just as the new person to put you on the spot versus the finance veterans either side. So I was just looking on LinkedIn. I hope you don't mind me saying, but you've got an extensive career in finance. You've worked for several local authorities, Birmingham, Slough, Enfield, etc. You're a couple of weeks in to Hillingdon. What what's your initial observations around what we're doing well from a finance perspective as a local authority? And conversely, how do we think we need to change, transform, get greater in discipline over the next sort of couple of years under your watch? An easy question at 8:10. Yeah.
I think we have a lot of corporate knowledge within the finance team, and that is really important and something that is of absolute importance and value to me in helping me get to grips with the situation here at Hillingdon. And I think it's then how we then kick on from, with that knowledge, what do we need to do given our current position. In terms of, there are a number of areas I would say that because I've not been part of that budget process coming into this year, that I haven't had my own kind of due diligence over what the content of the budget is for this year, and therefore the robustness of that. So there are elements within there that I would like to get into in more detail for my own reassurance and knowledge building, and to identify any further issues. So I would like to get into the savings in more detail. I'd like to get into the capital receipts and the transformation spend, for example, as other areas that are of note in how the budget has been built, and it's things like that. Also kind of looking at learnings from the last financial year as well. So what can we learn from the outturn from 24-25, so that we can have much more robust forecasting going forward and better budgeting, and then work that towards a more robust budget setting process to set us up well for 26-7 going forwards.
Councillor Punja and Councillor Chibnall.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the target operating model, because I couldn't see where it was in the report, where in the report the savings of 5 million were. So could I have some direction towards that, please?
Thank you, Councillor. The target operating model is currently sat in cross-cutting. So when you look at the Council's overall budget monitoring report, you'll see under corporate budgets there's a row that says unallocated savings. In there's about 7 million, so 5 million of that is the target operating model number. At the moment in the month 2 position, you'll see that that row is forecast to 0, so it's shown as a whole pressure. And then below at the bottom of the table, it's got a number of interventions bringing in. So we're looking to deliver that 5 million this year. At the moment, we're expecting roughly half of it to come from a review of the target operating cross-cutting measures. And then we've also brought in spend control measures. So we've got a HR spend panel, and then we're about to look at how we do our procurement and bring spend control measures into that area. So targeting 2.5 million from that roughly. So we're looking at delivering, give or take, 50-50 from those interventions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. One more.
Thank you for that, Andy. And I just wanted to highlight the point that the risk and mitigations pots has identified that there are more risks than opportunities if interventions remain at a risk, and please explain. So therefore, my question it will be, what are the implications for our cash outflows exceeding our cash inflows on borrowing and the legal position of the Council's budget?
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of legal position, the Section 114 legislation is in place, and that's really what dictates whether you're looking at a balanced budget or not. Within that, you are able to consider all options that are currently kind of on the table. So as we've publicly declared, we have submitted an EFS claim, so that enables you to consider that as part of your review of the against the Section 114 legislation. So in terms of the legal position, we are perfectly within our kind of legal boundaries to report as we have been, so there are no legal implications at the moment for the Council's financial position. In terms of cash flow, so this is what's driving the Treasury variance that's in the monitoring position, and it's one of the items that was flagged as a risk. So if the Council's position were to deteriorate, then clearly cash in, cash out gets different, and then that would then impact on the position.
All right, thank you. Councillor Jupiter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Oracle system. The last time we had finance here, they told us that there were a lot of issues with the Oracle system and the way it's been implemented. We were told that we have employed consultants to resolve all those issues. But I want to know if we have actually achieved that objective.
This issue has been extensively covered as part of the Audit Commission. It's slightly outside the reach of this committee because we're talking about the budget that relates to it. You'll see within the report there are a number of savings against the future of financial systems, as well as the spending of a number of transformation capital budgets to improve our Oracle system. So we have got a budget for it, and we're currently working on that as a project as a council, but we've covered that extensively within the Audit Committee.
All right, thank you. And going back to our savings table on Table 8, 25-26, page 61. So in the Finance and Transformation Portfolio section, and this is really just picking out particular items, but digital and technology contracts review. In what way do we seek savings? Let's put it that way. As far as that's concerned, if a contract is already let, is there room for different savings under different budget heads or something like that?
Yep. So let me give an example. So I have a procurement board that looks at all the digital. So digital will be a vast array of different technology contracts. So from very small, looking at one application, which is one license, to our whole Microsoft suite of licenses. So you're going from millions and millions to, you know, a couple of thousand. So we systematically review every single contract that is coming up. So we have a tolerance of looking at contracts that are within 9 months, 6 months and 3 months. We also will review contracts whilst within the contract to try and make sure we get the best value from a commercial perspective as an organisation. So we have a very systematic way of understanding our contracts, and why that is really important in the digital and technology space is contract prices are going up exponentially in not just in our sector, across all sectors. With the advent of AI, prices are going into a lot of things like line of business systems because they're investing heavily in AI. So contract prices in the technology space are going up a lot at the moment. So we make sure that we commercially review our contracts early enough so we get the best value as an organisation. And also we've got a systematic review of also looking at our systems as well. So we're looking at where we can reduce the number of systems we have in the first place. So to make sure we haven't got a proliferation across the organisation of lots and lots and lots of contracts. So my methodology is to make sure we're housing stuff into a smaller amount of larger contracts. And also making sure from a contract perspective is, and I've been in front of this committee before to look at things like automation, so to make sure we're not spending a lot of money on things that we can produce ourselves. So rather than spending a lot of money on proprietary contracts, we're looking at building some of those ourselves, which is more of a cost-effective way. So we have a very, very systematic way of looking at contracts across the digital and technology space.
Okay, because of course we did a very major review last year on procurement, year before. I always say last year when I mean 2 years ago, so there we go. On procurement, and one of the things that has somebody else got the red light on? Okay. One of the things that you get that sort of feedback, more than one red light on. One of the things that we picked up on were framework contracts in order to reduce contract costings. And that was a fairly big part of that report. But equally, it was consolidation of procurement across the board, because I think I can't remember the figure, but there was some enormous figure in terms of numbers of contracts that we have within the council, and we were rather keen on the idea of trying to reduce the numbers on the basis that it could be that they were being duplicated in some way. Perhaps you might be able to talk to us a little bit about where we are with the. I know it's not strictly within this, but it does align with this. Perhaps you could help us with where we are with that type of saving. And I've just been diverted by what you said about the fact that digital companies are essentially charging more in their contracts for their investment in AI. So what they're passing their, this is another question I suppose, but they're passing their research into AI onto us. Is there any way we can bat it back?
Two different questions there. So I'll do the nerdy bit about, so you're quite right actually, most companies are, you're seeing cost increase in digital contracts because they're putting their dev resource, i.e. the company is spending quite a lot of money to improve their products and putting AI into them, so therefore the cost of the product increases in terms of the contract value. So we're seeing that quite a lot across the, again, not just in local government, that's across the world. You've definitely had a crystal ball in this select committee, so congratulate you on, we are looking at procurement at the moment. So one of the investments we're making from the Capital Transformation Programme is a review of procurement and contracts across the council, which I'm leading on at the moment, which is looking at both where there are opportunities to look at both sourcing models, but also looking at value for money in terms of the way we procure services, the amount of contracts we have as an organisation, and look at whether there are any opportunities to either consolidate contracts, commercially manage contracts in a different way, and looking at opportunities as we are reaching the end of contracts to look at whether we can get better value by looking at them a different way. We're quite early on into the review. We've got a number of areas of focus that we're looking at in terms of where we're progressing some cost-saving measures about how we do procurement, but we're in fairly early days, and I'd be happy to report back to this committee at a later date on the progress of that.
All right, thank you. Well, look, that's a very detailed report, and again, obviously, we're very keen on looking at all those aspects. The savings issue we need to come back to, and in fact we said, didn't we, at the beginning of the year, of the calendar year, that we'd come back to savings, and we will want to come back to savings at each of our committee meetings as we go along, just to see and to make sure that we've got a handle on those. But I think for the moment, thank you very much indeed. It's been extremely fascinating. Thank you. I keep forgetting about the recommendations. Right, well, to note, as I said, the 24-25 out-term position, to note the 25-26 month 2 budget monitoring position. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Right, we can go on with those. We keep need to be reminded to agree the recommendations, but it's a thing that we have to do. All right. So the next item is the forward plan, and I can't imagine that anything other than noting is necessary unless anyone's got anything to pick up out of that. Any questions on the forward plan? Anything that you want to say, Anisha? No? All right. Okay, that's good. It's always worthwhile noting the forward plan. And then the work programme. All right. So we've already mentioned it, but we would like to come back to our asset use, knowledge and disposal, if that's what it takes, programme as a specialist topic. And I think we'd had hoped to have come back to it much earlier than this, but we are where we are. So have we got room for that at our next meeting? We can come back to that because it's, again, something that we've been very keen on. Councillor Bennett.
Did I imagine that we were going to go and look at the Platinum Jubilee Leisure Centre? You may have done it and not invited me, which is fine, but then I was looking and it kind of is now not on the roadmap. It's noted at the bottom of the multi-year work programme.
Yeah.
We don't have a date.
No, we do need a date, and we are going to have a look.
That is something I'm dealing with.
Oh, is
it? Yes.
Good.
I've been asked to organise something for a visit.
Swimming costumes not compulsory.
No, swimming costumes just yet, but it will be full PPE because it's still a construction.
Well, so we could give it a go, but it'd be a bit cold, I suspect.
Yeah,
at the moment.
The pool isn't filled yet. It'll be a few weeks before it is, but you'll probably be down before it's filled.
It's always better to have water in a pool, I suppose, really, isn't it?
But
no, it is something that we're keen on. Again, it cuts across our terms of reference. I think one of the committee has gone to have a look at it, or two.
Yes, there's definitely some people down from the committee. I think was it earlier in the year or late last year to have a look. Yeah.
So we get hard hats and tabards and stuff like that.
Yes, it'll all be supplied. Yeah.
Excellent. Good. Okay. Yeah. No, you were right. And we will go and have a look at that. There was something else we were going to look at as well. I can't remember. It'll come back to me. All right. Anything else in the work programme that anybody wants to raise? Or I tell you what I'd like to do. Do you remember when the fraud team came along and they were absolutely brilliant and gave us a lot of information? I think that was probably, I'll get this wrong, I think that was probably a couple of years ago now. I think it might be an idea to get those troops along just to give us an update on where we are. But they really were very, very impressive, so I think it'd be quite good to get them back as well. But if there are specific issues that members want to put on the work programme other than what you see on the relevant pages, then do let us know, and we'll include it. But we will come back to that major topic. All right. If there's nothing else that anybody wants, I will close the meeting.